Okay, in this tutorial we're going to take an example of architecture from the past. This is Nervi's small sports complex that he designed and built around 1957 for the 1960 Rome Olympics. I've seen this building in person and I've often thought about 3D modeling it, but to be honest I was a little afraid of it until I started working in Grasshopper, and I thought it would be a great example to 3D model parametrically, and that Grasshopper was a perfect tool that would allow me to easily 3D model it. So this is a photo of the building under construction, just to give you an idea of what it looks like in sort of in the built form. And let's look again at it as a wireframe in Grasshopper. So this is what this tutorial is going to allow us to do. Okay, so let's bring up Grasshopper, and I'm going to close that definition. And since it's in Italy, we're going to use meters for our units. So if we go to our options and we look at units, we're going to set the model units equal to meters. Okay. Okay, we're going to start out by creating a series of circles, and we're going to start with the main dome, which will be this area here. So we're going to create 3 circles, one at the base, one at the middle, and one at the top of that dome. Okay, so let's bring out the first circle. So I'm double clicking and I'm typing circle. I'll choose this component, which is looking for a plane, which by default is 0, 0, and we see that here in the Grasshopper window. I can control the radius of this circle by bringing out a number slider. Double click, start to type in number slider. I'm going to double click on the word slider and change this to integers. And my maximum will be 108, and we'll see why we'll use this number a little later on. And I'm going to set this to a radius of 30 meters. So the total diameter of that dome is 60 meters. So for the radius we'll use 30. And I'll plug that into the radius of the circle. And we're going to name our circles, because these are going to drive the form of this building. So this will be circle number 1. So I'm just going to right click and add number 1 to the name. And we'll be using that quite a bit. So that's number 1. So we're going to copy and paste this, and we'll create excuse me, we'll create 2 more circles. I'll name that circle 2. And circle 2 is going to have a radius of 24 meters. Copy and paste that. Right click, we'll call this circle 3. And circle 3 is going to have a radius of 12 meters. Okay, so these are all planar. They're at the 0 z height. So I need to raise circles 2 and 3. And I can do that using the move component. So I will double click and start to type in move. And Grasshopper needs a direction for the move. So I need a z vector. So I'm going to double click and start to type in z, and I'm going to choose my z vector. So that's my direction. I'll plug that into my t for the move, which looks for a vector input. The geometry that I'm going to move is circle number 2. And the distance that I'm going to move it is going to be 4 meters. So I'll copy and paste this slider, set it to 4, and I'll plug that in to that Z vector. So it's moved it up 4 meters. Now a move component is also a copy. So I'm going to select my circle 2 and I will hide it, just to make our life easier to see what we're looking at. And I'll rename this move component. I'll just add my circle 2 because that'll be important to access that later. Okay, so I can do the same thing by copying and pasting these components, and I'm going to plug in circle 3, rename this to circle 3. Okay, and the height of this circle is going to be 8 meters high. And again, I'm going to turn off the original circle because I have the copy. Okay, so there we go. This is the basics that's going to create our main dome. Now, for zooming and zoom scaling in Rhino, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take circle 1, I'm going to select it, and I'm going to bake it to Rhino. I did that by pressing the bake button. I'm going to deselect it in Grasshopper and select it in Rhino. So now if I do a zoom extents, it zooms to the extent of that circle. There's actually something in Rhino. Another command when the zooming gets messed up within Grasshopper is ZS enter, and that's a zoom scale. So now orbiting and panning is a little nicer. I'll deselect that in Rhino. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sweep, and I'm going to use circle number 1 as my rail curve. So what I need is a section curve, a 3-dimensional 3-point arc. Okay, so what I'll need are points on each one of these circles to draw the arc. So I'm going to do that with a component called end, which gives me an endpoint. So I'll need one of these for each circle. And you'll see now I have an endpoint, which is also the beginning, since it's a circle, to draw a 3-point arc through. So I'll double click and I'll start to type in arc, and I'll choose my arc component. I'll double click and I'll start to type in arc, and I'm looking for an arc 3-point. So it's ABC, so I'll plug these in order. A, B, C. Okay, and notice the end component, it has a start and an end for the output. Okay, so that's the arc, or the section curve for the sweep. So let's move over and we'll double click and we'll start to type in sweep. And this is a sweep 1 rail. So again, the rail of the sweep will be our circle number 1. So I'm going to plug that into the rail. And our section curve is going to be our 3-point arc. And there's what we're going to call our main dome. And once we subdivide this dome, we're going to get a better surface, not so segmented. So let's rename this sweep 1, or add to the name. We'll call this our main dome. Okay. So let's draw the tessellated geometry that makes up this dome structure. So I need two components to make a divided surface. So if I double click, the first one I need is a divide domain squared. The second one I need is called isotrim. Okay, so the first component makes a two-dimensional grid in the U and the V direction. And then the subsurface, or is called the isotrim, takes that two-dimensional U and V grid and makes a bunch of subsurfaces. So I need to plug that domain into the subsurface. The sweep main dome will go into both of these components. And then we start to see our divided surface. So we're going to need a couple of number sliders to control the U and the V grid. So let's go back to the beginning of our definition and copy and paste one. Okay, so for the V, we're going to use 6. And I'll copy and paste that. And for the U, this is going to be a pretty high number. In the end, it's going to be 108. But just to keep the dome simplified for now, since it's parametric modeling, I'm going to keep that count for the U relatively small. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to draw X's in each one of these subsurfaces. And maybe I'll lower the V count to see that. Each one of these subsurfaces has 4 points. And Grasshopper names them 0, 1, 2, 3. So 4 points starting with the number 0, moving clockwise. So I'm going to connect points 0 to 2 and 1 to 3. So to do that, I need to explode this subsurface so I can access the V, which are the points, and then I need to make 4 list items to access each one of those 4 points individually. Okay, so the next component we need is a brep component, which we can get that by starting to type in explode and choose brep components. We'll plug subsurface into that, and if I deselect it, you'll see that I have points at the ends of each one of those surfaces. So here's where I need my 4 list items. So I'll bring out a list item, and my list is going to be the list of points coming off that explode, and I'll need a number slider. And I'll set this first one to 0. I'm going to highlight the list item, and those are all my 0 points. Remember, there's one for each divided surface. So I can copy and paste 3 more of these. And remember, it's important to change the item number, so we need 1, we need 2, and we need 3. And now I said we first need a line from 0 to 2. So 0 to 2. And I'm going to hide my explode, my subsurface, and my divide, just so we can see these lines more clearly. And I'll also hide my sweep. Okay. So now we need our lines from 1 to 3. So I'm going to copy and paste that. And I'm going to plug in 1 and 3. So now we can start to see our if I deselect that, we can start to see our X's or our structure. And I'm going to go ahead and increase our U slider to 108 to better see the design of that dome. And I'm going to also hide these list items to get those points out of the way. So I'm going to select these list items and click on the blindfold. So now we have, if I Alt-Tab over, now we have this dome created relatively quickly. And keep in mind that our version is parametric. So for example, if I go back to the beginning, now I didn't use math for these circles, so they're not related parametrically, but let's just say I increase the radius of the base circle. You see that happening parametrically. So that's the beauty of Grasshopper. So we'll leave that at 30. Okay, to see this structure even better, let's hide the arc, the endpoints, and even circle number 2. Circles 1 and 3, we're going to continue to use those, but circle number 2, I can hide that. Okay, and that just gives us a better reading of that dome. What we can do visually in Grasshopper is we can zoom out, we can select the entire definition, and Ctrl G is a shortcut that groups these together. If we double click on the group, we have options for the bounding boxes of color. So this is just a visual, and what we can do is we can add a name. So if I drag this scribble from the ribbon, I can double click it. I'm going to type in main dome, and I can change the height of that to 50. Okay, and if I move it right from the middle, it moves ortho. If I grab it toward the end, I can drag it down. Again, if I drag it in the middle, it remains orthographic. Okay, so that's our main dome. So there's a top dome that has some straight lines. So we're going to use circle 3, and we're going to need another circle with a smaller radius, which will be our circle 4. So I'm keeping it simple in this definition. So if I select what makes up a circle, which is a number slider to control the radius, the circle itself, and then we're always going to have to move that circle some distance. So I need all of this to create a circle. So I'm going to Control C, Control V, and I'm going to drag this down. Okay, so we'll start the next part of our definition here. This is going to be circle 4. So I'm going to right click on this, call it circle 4. Also rename the move to circle 4. Okay, so this is going to have an 8-meter radius, and it's going to have a Z height of 8 meters. And we don't see that circle because this move component is hidden. So I need to show that. Okay, so there is our circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw straight lines from circle 3 to circle 4. And what we'll use to get points on those circles to draw lines is we'll use the divide component. So I'm going to double click and start to type divide, and we're looking for a divide curve. It's looking for the curve to divide, and I can plug the move into that. And then a number slider to control the amount of divisions. So I'll copy and paste one of these. And we're going to divide this into 108. So that's our divided curve number 4. We need to do something very similar for curve number 3, or circle number 3. So if I go up here, I'm going to copy and paste this divide. And the geometry for this divide is going to be my circle number 3. So now all I need to connect those two circles is a line component. And I'll plug the points from circle 3 in and the points from circle 4, and that's going to give me my straight lines. I don't like seeing those points, so I'm going to hide both of those divides. Okay, so that is our top dome. So I can group this definition here of the top dome. Ctrl G, double click on that a couple times. Bring down the scribble, double click on it, and we're going to call this top dome. Change the height to 50. Okay, so what we're going to make next is the columns, these buttress columns. And this structure has 36 of these columns. So we're going to make a circle to begin with down here at the very base of the column, and we're going to divide that 36 times. So let's go ahead and make that circle. So this is going to be, if I zoom in, this is going to be our 5th circle that we make. And again, in this definition, we're going to need a number slider, a circle component, a move, the Z vector, and a number slider. And while I'm here, I know I'm going to also need a divide, so I'll take all of that. And this is going to be circle 5. Okay, so this will have a larger radius. This radius is going to be 39. And the Z height is actually going to be negative 6 meters. So if I double click this number slider to turn it into a number slider that uses negative values, I swap the min and the max. So I make my max 0 and my minimum a negative number. And I only need to go to negative 20, is plenty. And this is going to be set at negative 6 meters, the value. Okay, so that's the base of the building there. And we'll call it the bottom or base of columns. Let's unhide the divide component for now so that we can see that. Okay, so we only need 36 divisions. So I'll change that to 36. Okay, so that's the base of our column. Now I'm going to create a 6th circle to be the top of the columns. So again, I can take all of this little mini definition, Control C, Control V. I'll rename these circle number 6. And this is going to have a radius of 35 meters and a negative height of 3 meters. Okay. And now I just need to draw lines from circle 5 to circle 6. So I can double click and type in line. So the points from circle 5 to the points from circle 6. Okay, so that's going to create my columns. And I will hide the divide components. Okay, so that's the base columns, and I think it's worth grouping this together. Ctrl G. And I'm going to copy and paste that text. So these are the columns. Okay, so looking back at that construction photo, we see that each column has a V at the top of it. So we're going to create that V, and we need a 7th circle. It's going to be our last circle. So let's go ahead and we'll take all of this, and since it's a group, I'm just going to individually select these, copy and paste, and this will be, I'm going to move this down a little bit, this is going to be our 7th circle. And this is going to have a 33 meter radius, a little smaller. And the Z height is going to be -1 meter. Okay, so we need to unhide the divide component. And this is going to have twice as many divisions on it than the base columns, because we're going to create a V. So this is going to have 72 divisions. And I'm going to do this by creating one of the V's. Okay, so I'm going to draw lines from the endpoint of one of these columns to 2 points on circle number 7. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So from my list of points from circle number 6, I'm going to find the first point, point 0. So I'm going to do that with a list item. Double click, bring out a list item. My list is going to be the list of points from circle number 6, and using a number slider that's set to 0, there we have it. So that's a good visual there. And point 0 of circle number 7 is right here directly above, but I need to call out points 1 and 71 to make my V. Okay, so I'll copy and paste this number slider and list item, plug in the list of points from circle number 7. Okay, see, 0 is not going to work. How does 1 look? Yes, 1 works good. I'll copy and paste this, and I'm going to use point 71, which is that point. Okay, let me pull these out a little bit. Okay, so now I need a line component. Okay, so point A is going to be that point, top of the column. And points B are going to be both of these, so I'll use my shift key. And there's my V. And not yet, but the way I'm going to populate this circular dome is I'm going to use a polar array of that V. Okay, so the last thing that we need to make, if I zoom in, we're going to need a line from this point of the V to 4 points from this structure. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we can polar array those along with our V. So let's Alt-Tab back to the construction photo. So that's here. There's going to be 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4 that we're going to make. And we can do this using a very similar process that we use to make the V. So I'm going to call out this point, okay, and that's going to come from our list of points from the 7th circle. Okay, so I will copy and paste a list item and a number slider. And I'm going to plug in the list of points from circle 7. Okay, so that's 0, so I need number 1. Okay, so that's going to be my base point. I'll hide this divide for circle 7 just to get that out of my way. Okay, so that's that point. Now I'm going to need points 0, 1, 2, and 3 from this circle. And that circle is our circle number 1. So we're going to use a receiver so that we can bring our circle definition down here where we're actually working, because our circle number 1 exists all the way at the very top. So we can do this by, if I click on the down arrow from the ribbon and under primitive, and I select data, just a generic data component, and I place that. And I right click, I'm going to rename this circle number 1 receiver. And I'm going to plug my circle into it. And the way I'm going to make this a receiver is I'm going to right click on it, and under wire display I'm going to choose hidden display, and when I deselect it, the wire is gone. Now I can move this all the way down. Okay, so just a little ease in the workflow. So I'm going to divide that circle now into 108 divisions. So I'll copy and paste the last divide and number slider that I have there. And I'm dividing circle number 1. And I'm going to turn on that divide component and change this to 108 divisions. Okay, so now this is what I'm working with. I'm working with the number 1 point, which is here, and then I have all these points. So I'm going to call out points 0 through 3. Well, I have very early on in my definition, I have list items 0, 1, 2, and 3 that I can copy and paste and move down here. So those exist here. So I'm going to grab these using my shift, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I'm going to zoom out and drag these down. And it's for my list, it's the list of points from this divide. So I'll plug that into each one of these. Okay, so let me just turn on these list items and then make sure they're the points that I want. So from here to here, then from here to here, and so on. Okay, so I can use a line component. Double click, start to type in line. So from this point, and I'm going to use my shift key to plug these in order. So there are my 4 line segments. I'll turn off my divides just so it reads better. And I'll turn off my list items. I have a few up here that can be turned off. Okay. Make sure you're Ctrl-S-ing, saving your definition as you go. Okay, I think this calls for, this definition got a bit sloppy, but I think it calls for maybe a grouping, but the last thing we need to do is do a polar array. So maybe we'll do the group at the very end. Okay, so what we're polar arraying is these 2 line components. So maybe it makes sense to rename these. So this is the V. So V column. And this is the double V. Okay, so these are the 2 components that we need to array. So a polar array can be done with a rotate component. So if I double click and I start to type in rotate, I'm going to choose the first rotate an object in a plane. And to do a polar array, we need a series component. And the series component will give us an increment, which is the n. Since there's 36 of these and a circle has 360 degrees, our increment is going to be every 10 degrees. And then we're going to have our count of 36. So I can borrow a number slider. Okay, so that's going to be our increment of 10 degrees. And our count is going to be 36. Okay, so I'm going to plug that into my rotation. Now, my rotation is in radians, as you can see on the screen. So I need a component that's going to convert 10 degrees into radians. So I'm going to double click and start to type in radians and choose the radians component. and we'll plug that series into the radians and the radians into the angle. Now the last thing my rotate component needs is the geometry to rotate. So let's plug in our V column. And what you'll see is it's only rotating one side of the V. So it just has to do with the list. So if I right click on my rotate, I'm going to change that to cross reference, and then I'll get both lists. And I can do the same thing now for my double V column. I can use my shift key and plug that in. So now this is an important component right here. As you see, when that's selected, it's quite a bit of geometry. So we can rename this. I'll right click on it and we'll just call it the V column array. And now we can go ahead and we'll make a group out of this part of the definition. That's going to be Ctrl G, double click, and I'll copy and paste that columns, and this is going to be our V columns. So there's our definition. Not too bad. I kept it vertical, so it makes it a little easier to read than the linear definitions. I'll save that, minimize that, and we'll get a better look at our dome. Okay, there you have it.